Hello again. I hope you enjoyed the last adventurers online that we did. And now I'm here with part 2 of Joseph's story. So we left Joseph. He'd been sold by his jealous brothers to some merchants. And the merchants took him to Egypt. And they took him to a slave market to be sold. And Joseph was bought by Potiphar, who was the captain of the guard in Pharaoh's household. Now Pharaoh was their king, so he was an important man. And Joseph went to work in his house. And God smiled on him, God watched over him, and Joseph did very well. And he started to take on extra responsibilities. Potiphar felt he could trust him, and so he gave him more and more responsibility. He became his personal servant, and then he started doing things that Potiphar had been doing, so that Potiphar was doing less and less, and Joseph was doing more and more. But there was one problem, and that was Potiphar's wife. She found Joseph a handsome, attractive man, and she was wanting him to come to her bedroom. Joseph would have none of this. He said, "No, my master would not like that. I can't do that to my master." And he rejected her. And this made Potiphar's wife very angry. So she went to Potiphar, and she lied to him. She claimed that Joseph had gone to her room and tried to embrace her. And she took with her one of Joseph's cloaks and said, "Look, this is what I took off him as I wrestled with him to get away from his embrace." And Potiphar believed his wife, and he was really angry with Joseph, whom he trusted. And so he sent Joseph to prison. So Joseph was put in the same prison as Pharaoh's prisoners. And again God watched over him and helped him. And he became trusted. And he became in charge of the other prisoners. And there were 2 prisoners taken into the prison that Pharaoh had become very displeased with. One of them was his butler, who served him his food, and one of them was his baker. And Joseph got to be friends with them. They became confident with him, and they came to know him well. And one day they came to him and said, "We've had really strange dreams, both of us, and we don't know what they mean." So Joseph said, "Well, why don't you tell me your dreams, and maybe I'll be able to help you with God's help." So first of all, the butler said, "I had a dream about a vine which had 3 branches on it. And the branches had leaves, and then they had blossom, and then beautiful grapes grew on it. And I picked the grapes, and I squeezed them into the cup, and served it to my master, the Pharaoh." And Joseph said, "I understand that dream. The 3 branches represent 3 days. In 3 days' time, the Pharaoh will call to see you, and he will reinstate you as your butler and forgive you." So then the baker came to tell him his dream, and he was buoyed up by the dream that the butler had had, and he thought this will be fine. And he said, "I had a dream that I had 3 baskets on my head, flat baskets, so they were stacked one on the other, and each one held bread, the Pharaoh's favourite bread. And he said, as I was walking to the palace to take the bread to Pharaoh, the birds came down and took all the bread, so that there was none left when I got to the palace." And Joseph said, "The 3 baskets represent 3 days. And in 3 days' time the Pharaoh will call you to see him, but he won't forgive you, and he will sentence you to death. So the baker waited day 1, day 2, day 3, and on the 3rd day it was Pharaoh's birthday, and he always had a celebration. And Pharaoh called for the butler and the baker to be brought to him. And he said to the butler, "I forgive you what you did, and you may return to your duties serving me." And he said to the baker, "You did a terrible thing which I can't forgive, and I sentence you to death." And the baker was led away. Now Joseph hoped that they would remember him and the fact that he'd interpreted their dreams, but they didn't. And Joseph was left in prison for another 2 years. After 2 years, the Pharaoh had 2 dreams, and he was very concerned by these dreams. And when he woke up next morning, he called all his magicians and his wise men to interpret the dreams for him. But none of them could, none of them understood the dreams. And suddenly the butler remembered Joseph. And he said, "Master, when I was in prison, the baker and I had a dream, and Joseph interpreted them, and he was absolutely right. What he said happened." So Pharaoh said, "Okay, send for Joseph." So Joseph was brought out of prison in front of the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh said, "I've had 2 really worrying dreams, and my butler says that you might be able to interpret them." So Joseph said, "So tell me your dreams, and with God's help, I might be able to help." And Pharaoh said, "The first dream was I saw 7 cows, fat, sleek cows coming out of the river Nile, and behind them were 7 thin, scrawny, sad-looking cows. And the thin cows attacked the fat cows and ate them." And then the second dream was I saw 7 full, beautiful ears of corn on a stalk, and behind it were 7 empty, sad ears of corn on a stalk. And the empty ears of corn consumed the fat ears of corn, so that they were gone. And Joseph said, "I understand your dream. The 2 dreams are telling you the same thing. The 7 fat cows and the 7 fat ears of corn represent 7 years, the same 7 years, when you will have full harvests. And the thin cows and the empty ears of corn represent the 7 years of famine and drought, when the harvests will be really bad." And Pharaoh looked at Joseph and said, "That's really worrying. What should I do?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "What are we going to do? What do you suggest? You seem a wise man." And Joseph said, "I think you should collect all the excess harvest, all the grain, and store it, so that when the famine comes, there will be plenty of food for your people. You will need to build extra granaries and storehouses in all the cities and appoint guards to guard them." And Pharaoh said, "Yes, that sounds right. I'm going to appoint you to be in charge of it." So Joseph was in charge of all of Egypt. He was in charge of people building granaries and barns, and he appointed guards to stand and guard them. And during the good years, where there was bumper harvest, the excess harvest was stored. And then, after 7 years, as Joseph had foretold, a famine started with no water and very poor harvests. And the people started coming to Joseph for food. And gradually, as the 7 years went on, people from all over the world heard that Egypt had food and were coming to Joseph, to Egypt, to get food and help. Okay, so last time we made our Joseph with his coat of many colours. So we've done that. So this time I thought, because Joseph went to Egypt, one of the things Egypt is very famous for is pyramids. So we're going to make our own pyramid, and I'll show you how to do that. The things you need will be some scissors, some glue or sellotape, a pencil and a ruler, and again card. Now I've used again the back of a cereal packet. If you've got card, that's great, use card, but you can use whatever you like. So the first thing I did was I cut out a 10cm square. Now it depends on the size of your card. You might want to make it smaller or larger, but 10cm fits on my cereal packet. So I've drawn round it, and then I'm going to measure 5 centimetres along each side and mark. So I'm going to mark halfway like that. Okay, and then I'm going to draw a line. It's going to be 10 centimetres long, and if you've put the ruler on your 2 marks, you'll make sure your line's straight. And I'm going to draw it 10 centimetres long that way and that way. Turn it round, do the same the other side. 10 centimetres long that way and that way, and then you're going to draw a triangle from the corner to the top of the line like that. Right the way round. Now, as I say, if this is too big for your piece of card, you can make it 6 centimetres, but you have to do half. So it's easier if you make it an even number, because it's easier to divide it in half then. So there we go. Oh, don't do that. And then on each one you need to draw a flap. So I'm going to do it freehand. You can do it with your ruler if you like. It doesn't matter if it's not absolutely straight. But this is going to be for you to put the glue on to join them together. Okay, so this is what your piece of card will look like. Now you can cut it out, and before you put it together, it might be nice to rub out these central lines, because you don't really want those lines on your pyramid. When you've cut it out, it will look like that. And then I scored along with my scissors like that Be careful, please. I scored along the edge. It just makes it easier to fold it up, because I wanted to fold it up that way. You don't want a cereal packet on the outside, so I folded it up that way. And then all you have to do is glue it on your tabs. Now, if you wanted to decorate it, you can put palm trees on it, or camels, or just make it pretty patterns. You can either do that before you glue it together. I need to glue that one as well, because I've got to tuck that in. Or if you've got a nice strong piece of card afterwards. So I tuck that in there, and on there. Tuck that bit in. And there you have your pyramid.